The saloon air was thick with smoke and sweat, the piano clanking unevenly in the corner as cowboys nursed their drinks. The late afternoon sun slanted through dirty windows, carving long shadows across warped floorboards. Then, the doors creaked open, and every sound stuttered to a halt. A figure stepped inside, broad as the doorway, his hat brushing the frame as he ducked through. The giant cowboy moved with a deliberate slowness, each step making the boards groan under his weight. He was a man carved from the road, dust caked on his boots, his coat worn thin, his face shadowed beneath a wide brim. Silence followed him like a second shadow. Men who usually laughed loud and bragged louder found their voices drying up as his heavy boots carried him to the bar. He didn't speak right away. He just set his gloved hand on the counter, the knuckles scarred and calloused, and waited. The bartender, nervous under the steady weight of that silence, poured a shot of whiskey without being asked. The giant cowboy took it, tilting his head back, his throat working as the liquid vanished in a single swallow. He set the glass down gently, almost reverently, before sliding a coin across the wood. That was when it happened. Mister, I can cook and clean. The voice was so small it barely carried, but in the sudden hush of the saloon, every ear caught it. Heads turned, brows furrowed, boots scraped as men twisted in their chairs. There, framed by the swinging doors she had pushed open with both hands, stood a girl, no more than 8. Her dress was faded and patched so many times it looked more like a quilt than clothing. Dust clung to her skin, her braids frayed with strands sticking out at all angles. Barefoot, she clutched a satchel so limp it seemed to hold little more than air. Her chin, however, was lifted. Her eyes, bright, wide, stubborn, were locked on the giant cowboy. I can cook and clean, she said again, louder this time, her voice trembling at the edges but steady enough to draw another sharp breath from the crowd. The crowd. The cowboy turned slowly, his massive frame shifting, the leather of his coat creaking. He was so tall that when he looked at her, he seemed to blot out half the saloon behind him. His hat shadowed most of his face, but not his eyes. Those dark, steady eyes studied her, weighing her words. He had fought men with guns drawn, stood face to face with rattlesnakes and storms, but this child staring him down was something altogether different. The saloon began to stir. Someone whispered, "Ain't that Annie from the edge of town?" Another muttered, "Her mama died last winter." A third grunted, "Her pa's a drunk who don't lift a finger." The murmurs rolled like low thunder until the bartender leaned in toward the cowboy and muttered, "She's been scraping by on scraps since. Nobody takes her in, 'cause she ain't worth the trouble." The cowboy's jaw flexed, his teeth grinding behind lips pressed thin. He knew what hunger looked like. He had seen it in camps where soldiers stripped the land bare, in towns where drought turned fields into dust. But there was something more than hunger in the girl's face. There was something more than hunger in the girl's face. There was defiance, a refusal to bend, the kind of fire he'd only seen in men who survived wars. "A little one," he rumbled, his voice low and deep, shaking the very air. "Oh, why come to me?" The girl's hands tightened on the satchel strap. Her lower lip trembled, but she bit it, refusing to let it show. "Because you look like you don't turn folks away," she said. Her words carried across the room like a bell. "You look strong, and I'm strong too. I can work. I'll earn my keep. Please, mister." The crowd was silent again, but this time it wasn't just curiosity holding them. There was something in the way the girl stood, straight back despite the bones showing beneath her skin, that made even hardened cowhands lower their eyes. The cowboy drew a slow breath. His hand, large enough to crush a man's skull, rested on the bar before curling into a fist. He had no home, no family, no ties. For 10 years he had ridden the trails alone, carrying nothing but his saddle and his silence. He had told himself that was enough, that loneliness was safer than losing someone. But as he looked at the girl, he felt something he had not felt in years, a crack in the armor of solitude he had built around himself. He turned, fully facing her, and slowly removed his hat. The light caught his face now, weathered, lined, scarred by sun and wind, but softened by something few had ever seen in him. He lowered himself down, one knee bending so his eyes were level with hers. "You got grit, girl," he said, his tone gentler than anyone expected. "More grit than most men I've ridden with." He studied her another moment, the weight of silence thick. "But no child ought to beg for work in a place like this. You belong someplace safe, not scrubbing pots for strangers." Her small chest heaved, and for the first time her eyes shimmered, but her chin stayed up. "There ain't any place safe," she whispered. Not for me. Mama's gone. Papa don't care. I'll starve if I don't find someone to take me. I can work. I swear it. Just... The saloon air tightened, men shifting uneasily in their chairs, some scowling, some pitying. But the cowboy's gaze didn't move from her. For the first time in years, he felt his chest ache with something other than weariness. He reached out slowly, his massive hand dwarfing hers, as he wrapped it gently around her tiny, calloused fingers. Her hand trembled in his grip, but she didn't pull away. I won't send you away, he said, his voice quiet, steady, and absolute. If you'll trust me, I'll see you fed. I'll see you safe. Go to a stand, or you got my word. Her lip quivered then, and the tears she'd been holding back finally slipped down her cheeks. But still, she stood tall, nodding once as though sealing a pact with him. The cowboy squeezed her hand, his chest tightening, as if some long-lost part of himself had just been returned. Let's get her. The crowd watched, stunned into silence. They had seen men walk into the saloon to fight, to gamble, to drink themselves blind, but they had never seen anything like this. An 8-year-old girl placing her life in the hands of a giant cowboy, and the giant bending not with force, but with gentleness, gentleness. He rose to his full height again, pulling her up beside him. With one massive hand, he set his hat back on his head, the other resting lightly on her shoulder. The two of them, one towering, the other so small she barely reached his belt buckle, walked toward the doors. Not a soul dared to stop them. Outside, the sun was sinking low, painting the sky in strokes of orange and pink. The cowboy's shadow stretched long across the dusty street, and beside it walked the small shadow of the girl who had refused to give up. For the first time in 10 years, he didn't feel like a drifter with nothing but miles behind him. He felt like a man with something worth carrying forward. And for the girl, Annie, the world didn't seem quite so empty anymore. The trail out of town was quiet except for the crunch of boots and the shuffle of small feet trying to keep up. The giant cowboy didn't speak at first. His long stride slowed, adjusting to the girl's pace, though he didn't look down. He walked like a man used to the silence, used to letting the horizon answer for him. Annie, clutching her satchel tight, stole glances upward every few steps. She had seen men in town look at her with pity or contempt, but none had looked at her like he did, steady, like she mattered. She mattered. Still, the uncertainty gnawed at her. Finally, she asked, her voice barely above the whisper of the wind, "What do I call you, mister?" He paused, the weight of the question settling on him. Names carried weight. For years, folks had called him A-Bear because of his size, his strength, the way his shadow made men hesitate before drawing their guns. His real name had long been buried beneath dust and time. He cleared his throat. "Oh, you can call me Bear," he said, voice low and rough. Annie nodded solemnly, as though making note of a truth she'd keep. "Oh, then I'll be your helper, Bear. I'll cook and clean, just like I said." A faint tug at his mouth threatened to be a smile, though it never reached full. "We'll see about that. First thing is getting you some food in your belly." They reached his camp by the river as dusk settled. The fire pit was cold, the bedroll worn, and the single saddlebag slumped against a log, meager signs of a life lived moving place to place. Annie's eyes swept over it all, taking in how empty it looked. "You don't got much," she said plainly. Bear grunted. "Enough for me, not near enough for two." She hugged her satchel, almost defensive. "Oh, don't take much, just bread sometimes. Maybe milk. I'll work for it, I swear." He crouched by the fire pit, striking flints until sparks caught and a small flame rose. The glow painted his face in lines of weariness. "Ain't about earning it. You're a child. Children don't earn their food. They're supposed to be cared for." His voice was thick when he said it, like the words carried the weight of a truth he hadn't spoken in years. Annie's eyes softened, but her chin stayed firm. "Nobody's cared for me since Mama." The words hit him harder than a bullet. He turned slightly, feeding sticks into the fire, hiding the storm in his chest. He remembered hunger. He remembered nights staring at stars, wondering if anyone would remember him if he fell dead in the dust. But no child should know that feeling. He reached into his pack, pulling out dried jerky and a heel of bread. Annie's hands trembled as he passed it to her. She didn't tear into it like a starving stray. Instead, she broke the bread in half and held a piece out to him. His throat closed. He hadn't expected that. Slowly, he accepted it, chewing in silence. And in that silence, something shifted, not just in her hunger being eased, but in him feeling the unfamiliar warmth of sharing. By the time the fire crackled steady, Annie had curled up close to it, her satchel clutched like a pillow, her eyelids fluttered, heavy with sleep. Bear sat watch, his broad back against a tree, rifle across his knees, eyes scanning the dark. Yet his gaze kept drifting back to her, so small, so stubborn, so brave. He wondered how many nights she had slept alone with nothing but her own courage for company. At dawn, he saddled his horse. Annie blinked awake, rubbing her eyes, then stared as he lifted her effortlessly onto the saddle. "You ride with me," he said. "Oh, safer that way." She clutched the horn, her small body stiff with both excitement and nerve. When he mounted behind her, his arm like a wall braced around her, she exhaled as though the world had shifted again. Dangerous. Yes, but safe in a way she hadn't known in months. Back in town, word spread fast. Folks muttered over their fences and leaned against door frames, watching the pair ride past. "That big drifter's taking her in," someone whispered. "It ain't right." Another spat. Annie heard too, her small shoulders tensing as they passed. He spoke low, only for her. "Let him talk. They don't know me. They don't know you. Only thing that matters is what we decide." She glanced up, her eyes bright and fierce. "Then I decide I stay with you." His chest tightened at the certainty in her voice. He gave a single nod, as if sealing a vow neither of them would break. The first test of their bond came sooner than either expected. A week later, Bear took a job hauling supplies for the rancher west of town. Annie insisted on helping, carrying small bundles, scrubbing pans at the ranch house, her determination outpacing her size. Some of the men sneered. "She'll slow you down, Bear. She ain't worth the bother." Bear's shadow fell over them, his voice a low growl. "You're worth more than every one of you with your tongues wagging. You want me to work, you respect her too." The rancher, a wiry man with a sharp eye, watched the exchange carefully. By sundown, when Annie had scrubbed the pans so clean they shone, he leaned close to Bear. "She's got grit. Don't let the town take that from her." That night, back at their fire, Annie curled under his blanket, the stars stretching endless overhead. "They'll never understand us, will they?" she murmured. Bear stared into the flames, his jaw tight. "Oh, don't need them to. All we need is to keep standing." "You and me." Her small hand crept across the blanket, finding his. His massive palm enveloped it. For the first time in a decade, Bear felt not just like a wanderer carrying the weight of his own solitude, but like a man trusted, needed, maybe even belonging. And for Annie, the world no longer felt so empty. She had found strength in the shadow of a giant, and in his silence she had discovered the sound of safety. The trail ahead would not be easy. He knew it, and so did she. But as the fire crackled and her breathing steadied beside him, Bear felt the truth settle deep in his bones. For the first time in years, he was not walking it alone.